Shalom, it's your brother Rashad coming back at you with another quick lesson. Before I get started, I want to give all praises, glory, and infinite honors unto Yahweh Ba'Shem, Yahweh Shai Ba'Shem, Rachak Wadash, Shalom, Wabarakim, La Bacharim, which is Shalom, peace, and blessings to the hopefully elect, man. All right, as well as those that believe in the gospel, and may you endure to the end, Lord willing. All right. And I just kind of want to land back off something that we was kind of going into at camp, the kind of the history, that any Israelite who's coming into the knowledge of the truth, must understand, all right, in order to understand the scriptures, all right, chiefly, the so-called New Testament, right, which, the controversial things, the circumcision, the uncircumcision, and the whole topic of, the Gentiles, which are the Israelite foreigners, who lost their nationality, all right? And I just want to get a few precepts, all right, mainly basically focusing on the history, all right, that you must understand, all right, and in order to understand the prophecies, man, all right, in order to understand, that we are those Jews who lost our nationality, all right, who lost our heritage, okay, and why this was written in the scriptures, So I'm gonna just get a few precepts on that, and it Lord willing to be edifying, all right. So we're gonna go to a few bookmark, all right, but I'm gonna start with Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 11. It says, "Wherefore remember that ye being in the time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision, by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made with hands." All right. And which, if you don't know, right, I'll explain it real quick. Those are the uncircumcision, basically what Jews, all right, are Israelite foreigners, all right, Israelites who weren't born, all right, keeping the laws, all right. And I'm going to get into explaining this history on why this happened, okay? So that's what the uncircumcision was. Those who were born not keeping the laws, right? Their parents didn't keep it, and at this point in time, they had Israelites scattered everywhere, right? Which is why you have all of these different books in the New Testament, so-called New Testament, which goes into Ephesians, Galatia, Corinthians, all right? These are all letters, all right, that were written to the churches in these different areas, right, where there were Israelites scattered abroad, you see? And it says, by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands, all right? And this is the circumcision is speaking of those Jews, who were keeping the laws from birth, all right, who were raised in the fashions of our laws, statutes, commandments, all right, and our ancient customs, you see? But I just wanted to bring this out because I'm getting ready to explain to you why it was a controversial thing, even with Cornelius, all right, with Apostle Peter, okay, and the whole vision with Cornelius, all right, and how the Lord is just beautifully orchestrating these things for us to understand in these times now, all right. All right, so we're gonna start with First Maccabees 1, all right, just to cover both sides. I should have pulled up the G&T just in case I want to go there. All right, I'm just have it on deck. Second book, first book of Maccabees. All right, here we go. So this First Maccabees, okay, in which, another point that was said, how, and this is something that, most Israelites know, all right, those who you've been following for a while, you must know that about the Apocrypha, all right, which means to be sent away, all right, or to be hidden, okay, because in the books of the Apocrypha, it covers what was taken out of the original's 1611 King James Bible, okay, and it furthermore ties, us into the scriptures and who the true Israelites are, okay. So this First Maccabees chapter 1, all right, And I'm gonna start at I'll just get the point, man. All right. It was basically just going into Alexander the Great, all right, who started the reign of the Greek Empire. All right. He was the one who put the Greeks in power, okay, in which he conquered, most of the known world, all right, during his reign, which was, abruptly 12 years. You see, as you can see in verse 7. All right, just giving a little quick summary, right? But when you jump down to verse 11, all right, and that's, I don't want the lesson to be long and drawn out, so I'm just trying to get to the points of things. So as First Maccabees 1:11, it says, now in those days when our Israel, I'm gonna start at verse 10, all right, so you can understand what happened, all right, and who was in power, who was in rule. Okay, it says verse 10, and there came out a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, and had been in hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137 year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So while this, Antiochus Epiphanes, all right, he was known for basically putting hell, all right, on Israel, right, in which you had the previous captivity that we were in under the Medo-Persian Empire, which I believe it was Darius or Cyrus. I think it was Cyrus that allowed us to actually, rebuild the temple. All right, when you go into First Esdras, all right, he actually allowed us to rebuild the temple and things. All right, but you had this guy, which was an Edomite, come in and he just, straight put hell on Jake, man. All right. In which where you get the word Hellenization from, all right? Because the word Hellen, all right, it goes back to the word Greek or Grecian, all right, in which, I think I pulled it up. Let me get it real quick. All right, so it says Hellenization is the spread and adoption of Greek culture, language, and ideas in other societies. This process, most prominent after Alexander the Great's conquest, involved local populations adopting Greek customs, administrative practices, and the Greek language, leading to a blending of Greek and local traditions into a hybrid culture. All right, and that's what it was. All right, it wasn't the spread, it was the force. All right, because the culture, the language, all right, the ideas, these things were forced, all right, on our people. You see, and we're gonna get into, how it was forced. All right, but in verse 11. It says, in those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well, right? So during this time, all right, of Hellenization, you had certain Israelites who went up, all right, willingly to make a covenant with the heathen, all right, to make a covenant with the Grecians, you see, to get in line, all right, or in league with them, all right, which, there were also Israelites that, wasn't with it. You see, we're going to get that, right? But verse 13, it says that certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. You see, verse 14, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. You see, these were those that willingly, all right, went out to do these things, And this is why you have to understand this history on why there was also, so much strife, between the circumcision and the uncircumcision, all right, in which I explained earlier in the lesson, you see. So when you drop down to, I think it's 40, I bookmarked it, 43, all right, 41, okay, so when you jump down to 41, it says, moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws, so that all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days and pollute the sanctuary and the holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised, and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end that they might forget the law and change all ordinances. And whosoever would not do so according to the commandment of the king, he said, he should die. You see? And so this is what they were making, all right, those Israelites who didn't go and make a covenant with them, all right? This was down the line. They said, all right, if y'all don't want to do this, okay, well, we just going to put you to death, all right? And it was a lot of Israelites that was cool with it, all right? They say, well, we're not going to do it, all right? Well, you just going to have to put us to death, to the point to where, it got to the point to where Jake was, secretly trying to keep the law, statutes, and commandments, all right? And this is what you call the Hellenization of our people, okay? This is how we got to the point, where it says in the scriptures, there's neither Jew nor Greek, okay? That word Greek is talking about those Israelites who were Hellenized, man, all right? But I'm going to jump down again, okay, to verse 60, all right? This is the quick example on how serious they were, all right, about all of the people being one, all right, and on one accord, all right, the performing the abomination of desolation, all right, bringing swine's flesh in the temple, man, that's hella wicked, man. You see? Sacrificing unto idols, man, that's hella wicked, man, all right? That's forbidden in our laws, you see? I believe it's Deuteronomy 7:3, right? Might be thinking something else. No, I'm thinking about something else we was talking about. If it come to me, I get it, but otherwise it's all good. All right. But so when you go back to First Maccabees 1:60, it says, at the time, according to the commandment, that they put to death certain women. You see? So when you go back up, it says, so whosoever would not do according to the king, to the commandment of the king, he should die. All right. So they didn't want to leave the children uncircumcised, on the 8th day, you're supposed to have your child circumcised or whatnot. Right. That's in the law. Okay. In which, our people was always zealous, for the law, all right, because that's how, before Yahushua, all right, which this is during the Greek Empire, all right, the Greco-Roman era, all right, before Yahushua came and made us, give us that grace, you see. But it says, when you go back down, it says, and at the time, according to the commandment, they put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised, you see? So this is how wicked, okay, how evil the ruler of, Antiochus Epiphanes was towards our people, who still was trying to keep the law, okay? Just for circumcising your child, you were put to death, man, all right? It says 61, and they hanged the infants about their necks and rifled their houses and slew them that had circumcised them. How about many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat any unclean thing? Wherefore, the rather to die, and that they might not be defiled with meats, and that they might not profane the holy covenant. So then they died, and there was very great wrath upon Israel. All right. And this was the mindset of, the Israelites who still wanted to believe and trust in Yahweh Bashim Yahushai. All right. Because they didn't want to follow the ways of the heathen, okay? And when you have a line of generation to generation, okay, who's still following trying to follow the law, statutes, and commandments to the best of their ability, all right, versus, you look at the other side, right, which is called the uncircumcision, who just willingly, okay, went after the customs of the heathen, all right? This is why there was so much strife and so much confusion, right, during the times of Apostle Paul and Apostle Peter, all right, because they felt, they didn't feel as if that, once you chose the circumcision felt as if once you chose the way of the heathen, you should stay that way, all right? And it shouldn't be a grace for you to come back unto the Lord, all right? Which, it's a carnal way of thinking, all right? But how else would one think when that's all they know, you see? Which is why we need Yahushua to be that mediator, all right, and break down that middle wall of partition, you see? Which we're going to get right here in Ephesians, all right? And I'm going to get some more in this Maccabees, all right, Ephesians 2, all right? Verse 12, it says that at that time you were without Hamashiach, being aliens, all right, strangers, you see, from the commonwealth of Israel, all right, which that word commonwealth goes into our citizenship, all right? It says of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without power in the world, you see? But now in Hamashiach Yahushua, ye whom sometimes were far off are made nigh by the blood of Hamashiach Yahushua, all right? And, that's how those Israelite foreigners, okay, were grafted back in. Why? Through the blood of Yahushua Mashiach and his sacrifice, all right? It's going to tell you in verse 14, for he is our peace, who had made both one and had broken down the middle wall of partition between us. You see, so when you read in the NLT, verse 14, for Hamashiach himself has brought peace to us. He united Jews and Gentiles into one people. All right. And this Gentiles is speaking of the Israelite foreigners. OK, those who were Hellenized. OK, those who were called Grecians. OK, but their fathers trace back to the line of an Israelite man by blood. All right. Pursuing the Romans, the 9th chapter. OK. So it says, and in his own body on the cross, he broke down the wall of hostility that separated us. He did this. I'm going to just finish it out in the NLT. He did this by ending the system of law with its commandments and regulations. He made peace between Jews and Gentiles by creating in himself one new people from two groups, right? And we know that word new is kainos in the Greek, all right, which means refreshed, okay? So basically breaking down that enmity, all right, the anger between, the circumcision and the uncircumcision, all right, because we can understand the history and the things that were going on, or how some of our forefathers were willing to die, all right, about what they believed in. But on the other side, some of our forefathers just went willingly, you see. So that's why it was so much strife there. All right, so much enmity, okay? And which I could keep going, but I'm going to come back. All right, I had a couple bookmarked Maccabees. So I got all of these. All right, so I'm going to go to second Maccabees, chapter 6. All right, and what you can read, I'm only going to read a little bit, maybe 3 verses here, but you can go all the way down, man, to, one of my favorite accounts I like to bring out, with Eleazar and, his example that he left for us of integrity. All right. You can read that all the way down on your own time. Right. But I just want to get this real quick. It says, Second Maccabees chapter 6, verse 6, it says, neither was it lawful for any man to keep Sabbath days or ancient fasts or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. And in the day of the king's birth every month, they were brought by bitter constraint to eat the sacrifices, and when the fast of Bacchus was kept, the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Bacchus, carrying ivy. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen by the suggestion of Ptolemy, which, he was a descendant of one of the 4 generals, all right, of Alexander the Great. It says, against the Jews that they shall observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices, and whoso would not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles, all right, which this is speaking about the actual heathen, all right, the manners of the actual heathen should be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery. That's the point. For there were two women brought who had circumcised their children, right? Whom when they had openly led round about the city, the babes handling their breasts, they cast them headlong from the wall, and others that had run together into caves nearby to keep the Sabbath day, secretly being discovered by Philip, were all burnt together, because they made a conscience to help themselves for the honor of the most sacred day. You see? This was the type of things that they were doing to our people, and just for keeping the law, statutes, and commandments, man. All right? Now, when Jeremiah said that in Jeremiah 17, is it 17 and 4? 4 and 17, you know, get it real quick. That thou, even thyself, yep, Jeremiah 17 and 4, and thou, even thyself. So even Jeremiah himself, you know, another cut to, you know, those that don't understand reincarnation, right? But it says, and thou, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thine heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not, for ye have kindled a fire in mine anger, which shall burn forever. All right, in which we you know, have totally, all right, from that point on, all right, we have totally been discontinued from our heritage, man. All right, from the time of the Greeks, the Romans, right, and you still had Jakes ruling during the so-called Dark Ages, all right, which you would know as the Byzantine Empire or the Holy. Certain Jakes, you know, mainly the diaspora, right, that was scattered throughout the western parts of Africa and eventually brought over here, all right, through transatlantic slavery, you know. But let me see, because I wanted to get something in First Maccabees 2, all right, just to show, you know, what was the mindset of those Jews, all right, that still was ultimately rather than to serve Yahweh Shem Shai than, you know, to make covenants with the heathen, right? And these were those, you know, who ancestors, all right, the circumcision, these were their ancestors, all right, who had this mindset, all right, which, you know, you should know about Judas Maccabees, all right, Mattathias, all right, and these different accounts, man, you know, all the way up into the time. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself, all right, so I'm gonna jump to Second Maccabees chapter 1. I'm going to start at 15, all right? It says, in the meanwhile, the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came into the city of Modin to make them sacrifice. And when many of Israel came unto them, Mattathias and his sons came together. And then answered the king's officers, said to Mattathias on this wise, thou art a ruler and an honorable and great man in the city, and strengthened with sons and brethren. Now therefore come thou first and fulfill the king's commandment. He didn't ask no questions. He told him, look, now you got to come do the king commandment, man. All right. Like it's all the heathen have done. Yea, and the men of Judah also, you see, and there were those that already had consented to it, right? It says, and such as remain at Jerusalem, so shall die in thy house, being the number of the king's friends, and thou and thy children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. And Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers, and give consent to his commandments, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. Our power forbid that we should forsake the law and ordinances. We will not hearken unto the king's words to go from our religion either on the right hand or on the left. Now when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in the sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, all right, which he was coming to sacrifice abominations, man, you know, wickedness. It says, which was at Modin according to the king's commandment, in which thing, when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled. neither could he forbear to shew his anger according to judgment, wherefore he ran and slew him upon the altar. Also the king's commissioner, whom compelled men to sacrifice, he killed at that time, and the altar he pulled down. Thus dealt he zealously for the law of the Most High, as Phinehas did unto Zambri, the son of Salom. And you know, this is just a staple in the scriptures, man. All right, he went and slew him, all right, on the altar, man. You know, on the altar he went and slew him, right? Wasn't having that shit. You know, just because you consented, we ain't about to do that, all right? As Joshua said, you know, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, all right? So what was I? First Maccabees 2:24. I'm gonna read it, see what they got in the GNT. It says, when Mattathias saw him, he became angry enough to do what he had to do. Slakia, to do what he had to be done. Shaken with rage, he ran forward and killed the man right there on the altar. All right. But, you know, I just wanted to get that point just to show, you know, how serious it was, you know. But, you know, this ultimately led to, you know, Judas Maccabees and, you know, revolting against, you know, this whole instance of, you know, Hellenization and going to war with the Greeks, in which, you know, they were ultimately overcome or overran. All right. And basically, you know, when they got to the point to where it was very few of them left, you know, they had basically, you know, made a friend of the Rome, all right, or the Romans, you know, who was basically taking over the Greeks, all right, in which I had that. I'm gonna end it off with that, right? This First Maccabees 8:23. It says, "Good success be to the Romans and to the people of the Jews by sea and by land forever. The sword also an enemy be far from there. If there come first any war upon the Romans or any of the confederates throughout all their dominion, the people of the Jews shall help them, and at the time shall be appointed with all their heart. Neither shall they give anything unto them that make war upon them, or aid them with victuals, weapons, money, or ships, as it has seemed good unto the Romans, but they shall keep their covenants without taking anything therefore. In the same manner also, if war first come upon the nation of the Jews, the Romans shall help them with all their heart, according as the time shall be appointed them," right? And so basically this when Rome was coming into power, all right? And, you know, Judas Maccabees and his brethren, you know, they went to make a peace treaty with him, you know? So from up until that point in time, right, which is how you still had Jews keeping their laws, statutes, and commandments, all right, through, you know, the men with the mindset of Judas Maccabees, all right, the Assyrians, okay? And it's good history to know, all right, and read about, you know? So that's pretty much the point, man. So, and Lord willing, you know, this was edifying, all right? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and give all praises, glory, and infinite honors to Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, Bashim Rekakwadash, and double honors once again to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings. Shalom, Wabaraki.